take it away.
Right, thank you. So I got to work with a program called Colorado Bat Watch over the summer, which is part of an organization called Rocky Mountain Wild. Colorado Bat Watch, or CBW, is a community science project that, while I was working on it, was in its beginning stages, still being planned before being executed. I was really excited for this project because one of my favorite aspects of conservation is education. I have a little bit of an educational background when it comes to environmental education, and I really wanted to flex that with this, with getting involved with volunteers and community scientists. So I was super excited for that. What I didn't realize initially was there was a lot of work that had to be done before that could even happen, but I soon found that out. There we go. So a little bit about Rocky Mountain Wilds. I would say they're based in Denver, but they're really based all over the southern Rocky Mountain region. This picture comes from their website, and it's, it's a pretty general depiction of where they do their work, but it's true, they do a lot of work in a lot of different places. The people who work for it kind of can live in different places, even in different states, but they all work within this region. It was founded in 1999 originally as the Center for Native Ecosystems. Your team consists of a lot of different disciplines. There's conservation biologists, ecologists, GIS specialists, attorneys, and a lot more. Throughout their various projects in the past, they've accomplished a lot of things. Notably, they've helped secure Endangered Species Act protection for a few different species, one of them being the Canada lynx and also the Gunnison sage grouse. These are just some quick examples of a lot of their different programs besides the one that I got to work on. So a couple of these are related to wildlife corridors, as well as oil and gas on federal lands. A lot of them bring in members of the community with community science, whether that be putting up game cams or identifying species, or even like the Colorado Pika project, which I actually got to go be a part of for a day, which was awesome. And go monitor pikas, these little cute Pokemon looking things, up in the Rocky Mountain National Park, monitor the populations, their habitats. They do a lot of great work. I wanted to shout out my team really fast that I got to work with. I got to work with mainly Megan and Paige from Rocky Mountain Wilds. They have so much on their plate and they do so much amazing work through Rocky Mountain Wilds, so many different projects and just diverse locations that they work in, and they still were able to support me throughout this entire thing. So I just really want to shout them out. So really fast, just about Colorado Bat Watch, as I said, it's a community science project or citizen science project. These are the two main goals of Colorado Bat Watch that I think really show what it's all about. The first being CBW aims to provide reliable data to multiple agency partners, including Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Forest Service, CNHP, Colorado Natural Heritage Program, as well as USGS North American Bat Monitoring Program. And the point of this is to help these organizations better meet their bat monitoring needs by providing baseline population data in the state of Colorado. There's a surprising lack of data about bats in the state. Kind of makes sense because they're pretty mysterious animals and they're not always easy to find or monitor, but once we get into some of the threats that they face, it's important that these agencies have this data. And that would come from community scientists going out and actually monitoring themselves. The second goal, which is pretty common with most community science projects, is to build public support for the actual conservation of the target species, that being bats, through community outreach and education. So there's two phases to Colorado Bat Watch. Phase one kind of deals with developing a database of where bat roost sites or bats might be within the state. This is done by either communicating with other agencies, saying, hey, do you know where the bat roost might be? Yes, it's here, and then putting that in a document, or just having the public go out and look for it themselves and uploading that data. Phase two then draws on that and will actually train members of the public to go out to these roosts and conduct monitoring of the populations, of the health, to colony counts, And then that data will eventually be shared with agencies. So my capstone project doesn't necessarily fit in either of the phases. It was before phase one. It was kind of helping phase one really kind of get going. It was based off of a grant that we were provided by Larimer County, which allowed us to kind of pilot Colorado Bat Watch within the county. Larimer County is, of course, where Fort Collins is, the area around us. It was interesting because I was actually the only person located anywhere near Larimer County working on this. The other members of Rocky Mountain Wild were based in either different states or just different part of Colorado. So I was kind of I had to physically go and accomplish a lot of the tasks within the county and observe things myself. So what that ended up being was, in order to fit the requirements of this grant, we had to prepare and facilitate 2 bat walks in Larimer County open space. Larimer County open space is our recreation areas throughout the counties. So examples might be Lions open space, Red Mountain open space, Eagles Nest open space. There's many different ones. We had to identify a good location to have a bat walk, plan it, and then actually conduct it with volunteers to come out. And I'll get into what a bat walk is in a little bit. The last part of my capstone project was just trying to create a measure of support for whoever continues on with this project, whether that's Rocky Mountain Wild, as they will be, or if it's a future CLTL student, and just provide them with the materials that they need to do so successfully. So let's just get into some activities that CBW volunteers might take part in. So one is just reporting bat observations. If someone's out wherever in the state and they see bats, they can report it using Survey 123. Another is, like I said before, monitoring bat colonies, doing colony counts, monitoring the health of a specific colony. And lastly, becoming a bat ambassador. What that really means is just, taking steps to help bat conservation, whether that be putting up a bat house or even just keeping your cat inside at night so your cat doesn't go out and get bats. This is also fun, but you can if you donate $35, you can adopt a bat and you'll actually get like a little bat stuffy as well as stickers and stuff, which is cool. So let's get into bat walks. What that is events that allows the public to come learn about bat ecology and conservation. They can learn how to identify bat species and how to observe them, how to monitor them. They act as a form of education for the public, as well as a form of training for the future activities in Colorado Bat Watch. So really fast, there are 18 species of bats in Colorado. They can be found in a lot of different places. There's a lot of abandoned mines in the state, so they can be in mines, different abandoned structures, or even occupied structures. A lot of the times they'll be in really like craggy rock talus, like you see in this photo right here. Found under bridges. A roost is essentially just where bats live. That's where they are usually during the day. It's where they sleep. It's where they give birth, where they raise their babies, as well as where they hibernate. Now, usually when they hibernate in a roost, it's going to be a roost with it's going to be usually like a stable temperature. So that might be like a mine or a cave. As we probably know, bats emerge after dusk to go feed on insects, and they eat tons of insects. So this is just one of the bats found in Colorado. It's a fringed myotis. This is another one called a hoary bat, which I was able to see a ton of over the summer. And then this is a Townsend's big-eared bat, which is just absolutely hilarious that this thing even exists. Also, if you flip it to the side, it becomes a toucan. But yes, this is a Townsend's big-eared bat. The 3 species that I just showed, besides the toucan, of course, are actually U.S. Forest Service Region 2 sensitive species. And so what that means is there's concern about their long-term viability on Forest Service land. So I want to get into some of the threats that bats face. And there's a lot, whether that's wind energy or climate change, but I wanted to kind of get a little bit more in depth about a few. One of these is habitat loss. So as I said before, bats often use abandoned mines as their roosts. Abandoned mines are dangerous to the public if someone were to fall in, so they're often closed off, which you're closing off bats to a roost site. So that's one way they can lose habitat. There are certain ways to close it off where they can still get in, but that's not always done. Bats live in the bark and knot holes of trees, as well as, like I said before, structures such as barns. If trees or structures are demolished or moved or taken down, they're actually losing their habitat. Pesticides is another big one. As I said before, bats eat a lot of insects. And when they eat insects or drink water that has residue of pesticides in it, bioaccumulation of toxic pesticides can occur within them. This can lead to negatively affecting their reproductive processes, as well as reducing their energy reserves. Also, pesticides aimed at killing insects will just reduce insects and their amount of food as well. This is the big one. This is white nose syndrome. It's a disease that has killed millions of bats in North America. On the left here, you can see a bat with white nose syndrome. Obviously, the white nose as well as the wings are covered in this fungus. On the right is actually the fungus itself. We'll just call it PD because this is a very interesting word for it, but this is the actual fungus that causes it. It grows in damp, cold, dark settings, so oftentimes where bats are hibernating. It'll cause them to become more active during hibernation and burn more fat. So they'll actually wake up and be like, I need food, and fly out in the winter to get food. If you see a bat flying in the winter or acting irregularly, it could be a sign of white nose syndrome, and you should report it. It was only discovered in 2007. It's very recent. There were photos from 2006 in Albany, New York, where it was officially discovered in 2007, where some cavers had photos of bats with the fungus on them, but they didn't know what that was at the time. So the earliest sighting is 2006. We don't know where it came from. It does exist in Europe and Asia, but bats in those continents don't get sick from it. But most bats in North America do. The spores can last for a really long time on surfaces. Most often, bats spread it from just bat-to-bat contact, but it can be spread through either climbers on their gear or cavers. So this is actually a little postcard that the White Nose Syndrome Response Team, which is a really good resource for facts about the disease, puts out, just saying clean your gear before you go in. There is no cure for this disease right now. What I will say is that there is a vaccine being worked on, but as of right now, there's no cure. While I was doing this project, it was not yet in Colorado, but it existed in the states bordering Colorado. So a huge part of this project was we need to provide baseline population data of bats before this gets here. This is going to get to the end of the state. Let's prepare ourselves before it does. This was a map that I took a screenshot of in June of 2022. As you can see, it's not in the state of Colorado, but it is in bordering states. The cooler colors indicate where it was for like older areas where it was discovered. X is Albany, New York. And you can see as it gets warmer, that's where it's kind of spreading west across the country. So I want to touch on agriculture and the importance of bats on this. Bats have a huge impact on agriculture. They're estimated to save farmers billions of dollars every year in pesticide and crop damage costs. And this all comes down to bats eating tons and tons of insects. They're a natural pesticide for farmers. There are some species of bats that can eat over half their body weight in insects in a single night, which is crazy because they're so small. I just put this screenshot of an article that's fairly new about the effect that white nose syndrome has had on land value, agricultural land value. Dale T. Manning is an associate professor at CSU. He's of agriculture and consumer economics. And so I just wanted to put that up there because it kind of details not only the effect that bats have on saving money for producers, but what white nose syndrome has done to that. One fun fact is that bats are essentially the only pollinator of agave. So this little guy right here is called a corn rootworm. On the left, it's a western corn rootworm. These are on the right are a collection of them, but the one in the middle is a western corn rootworm that can be found in Colorado. They are estimated to cost producers around $1 billion a year in crop damage. Bats love eating these insects, as well as a lot of other ones, but this was just one example of ones that bats take care of a lot. So I want to get into some of my specific capstone activities for helping pilot Colorado Bat Watch before it was officially launched. So one of the first things I did was put together bat monitoring kits for volunteers. These will be used by volunteers once they can actually go out and monitor bats themselves. We partnered with, Wolverine Farm Public House, which is a 501c3 nonprofit literary and arts organization. They do a lot of stuff. They also, most importantly, have coffee. This was where we had our class that one time when we played with the Play-Doh. They also just partner with a lot of nonprofits like Rocky Mountain Wild, and they allowed us to set up this worksite box on their property where volunteers can actually go in and check out these bat monitoring kits. So in the kit, there's a hand tally click counter. It's like a pitch counter. It's for counting bats in a specific location. There's a headlamp with red light. Sometimes when you're in kind of an enclosed area, the red light won't scare the bats off. A clipboard with internal storage. Inside the clipboard, there will be different training materials, information, and then finally an echo meter. And I'll get into what an echo meter is. So I was going to play this video, but it's not going to work over Zoom. I am going to open it and just skip to a part where we can see the echo meter. Let's see here. So that box attached to the iPad is an echo meter. What that allows people to do is go out, point it at a bat flying around. It'll read the frequency of their echolocation, which usually humans can't hear, and it'll come back and tell you what kind of species that bat is. It's a really cool device, and each bat monitoring kit has one in it for volunteers to use so they can identify species. Bats are kind of difficult to identify just by looking at them because one, it's dark, two, they fly super fast, three, they're small, you know, they all kind of look the same. Sometimes you can kind of tell, but usually it's pretty hard, so you need a device like the echo meter. Let's see here. All right, so the most important deliverable of my project were the actual bat walks at the end, and I had to prepare for these bat walks. So what I had to do was communicate with others to locate bats. I sent emails out to people from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Colorado Natural Heritage Program, and other organizations, people involved with bats. And I said, hey, do you know where bats are on Larimer County open space specifically? Then I was going to, once I heard back, I was going to ground truth these locations, say, hey, this would be great for a bat walk, plan it out, and then go. Super easy, right? Not at all. This is the actual photo of me falling down the conservation email rabbit hole of trying to find out information. So every time I emailed someone, they would be really helpful. They'd say, there's bats here on campus, there's bats, but it wasn't on Larimer County open space. It didn't fit the needs of the project. And so they'd say, well, let me say, ask this person. So then I asked that person, and they say, no, ask this person. No, ask this person. And it just goes down the line, like completely. And I never got any information from that was helpful with finding them on that place. So I had to go do it myself. This was stressful because I had to go out and find bats in these areas myself before it started getting cold, before they started going into hibernation, because we had to have the bat walks before then. This first location, I went to tons of locations, and I just have a few on here just to talk about. Is not a Larimer County open space, but it was kind of where I went to test how to find bats personally. I know that bats come out and fly near water because insects are usually near water. Bats have to drink. They often live in trees, and I need a good area that's easily walkable for people on a bat walk. And I thought, well, there's the Pooter Trail just north of Lee Martinez Park. So I went there one night, and I probably saw 50 bats. Like they were literally like flying by my head, almost hitting me in the face. And it was amazing. And I was like, this is great, but it's not on Larimer County open space. Let me try a few other places. So another place that I tried was Horsetooth Mountain open space, specifically the Horsetooth Falls Trail. I was drawn to this because Falls, there's water. There's some rocky outcroppings there. So I thought, well, I bet there's bats here. Also, it's open 24/7. So you're not going to get locked in when you're trying to find bats at night. So I went here, and this is how it looked during the day. It was really, it was like, okay, like a mile in to actually get to the falls. There's actually a deer in this photo on the right here, but you go, I was like, this is okay. Like it's not like flat, but you just hike a mile in and a mile out. So I get to the falls. There's no water. I didn't know that, but I'm like, great. Okay. There's not going to be any bats. This is the bottom of the falls and this is the top of the falls on the right. I was going to leave. I was like, this isn't working. And there were some hikers there and I actually talked to them. I said, hey, have you ever seen bats here? And they were like, oh yeah, we see them all the time. And I was like, okay, I'll stay till night. So I stayed till night. And I hung out, and lo and behold, there were bats flying all over the place. And you could go at the bottom of the falls and look up and see them flying around. And if you go to the top, you'd see them like kind of just right next to you flying around. And I was like, this is great for a bat walk location. And then night hit, and I had to hike out of there. And this was me trying to take photos while hiking out. And I literally almost fell off a cliff like 8 times. Like, look how scary this looks. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking there's no way I can bring a bunch of volunteers out here. This is like, there's safety hazards. This is not accessible at all. As cool of a location as this is, I can't do it. And so I tried a bunch of other locations, other open spaces. And I kind of thought, what about Lions open space? That one's pretty close to town. There's pretty good parking. It's flat. The Poudre River runs right through it. There's water. It's pretty good. So the first time I go, I don't see anything. And I'm so frustrated. I'm just so mad. And I'm like, I'm not going to do this. Winter's going to hit. There's going to be no bat walks and it's going to be a complete failure. And then I go a few times and I just don't see any bats. And then one time I went when I was just like, there was no hope. I didn't know what to do. And I saw maybe like 15 bats flying around or 10 bats. And I was like, all right, there's bats here. This maybe could work. And so I went back another time and I saw them again. And I said, okay, this looks like the perfect place for a bat walk. I mean, it's pretty, it's flat, it's paved. The river goes right through it. Like I said before, there's a lot of parking. There's areas to set up beforehand and kind of have the discussion about bat ecology, conservation with everyone before we start. This is perfect. So I went back to Rocky Mountain Wild and I told them, I found the perfect place. I want to do it here. And they agreed with me. Let's do it here. So we have all the bat walk stuff planned out. We have the dates set up. It's already full. As soon as it goes live, it fills up with volunteers. There was a huge wait list for people to get on it from other bat walks previously. And one day I'm about to have a meeting with Rocky Mountain Wild, and I get an email from a fella named Logan Haynes in our program, and it just suddenly changes everything. Yes, that's right. White nose syndrome that was bordering Colorado, but not yet in the state, was all of a sudden discovered in the state. First, it was discovered down in southeastern Colorado, and then a few weeks later was found in northern Colorado, right outside of Fort Collins. And I think the worst news out of all of this is that Elton John is not going to be touring anymore if you look at this. But this completely, like, I didn't know what to do. I was like, how is this going to change things? Like it was a huge shock. So this was the map that I had before. This was the map I was kind of looking at and going with for my whole project. And then all of a sudden it looks like this, these 2 locations in Colorado. So we can no longer say, let's prepare for this to get here. It's already here. And besides that, the bat walks still have to go on. We have them at Lions Open Space. This is Aaron right here, who's an ecologist who works with Rocky Mountain Wild, and he is probably the most knowledgeable person about bats I've ever met. And so I got to do the bat walk with him, and he kind of talked about bat ecology and the monitoring aspect of it with everyone before we started. And then I actually got to talk about Colorado Bat Watch, the opportunities that volunteers were going to have in the future. And then I got to talk about white nose syndrome. And what was surprising is a lot of people didn't even know about it. And these are people who loved bats, who showed up to this because they loved bats. They wanted to get involved with bat conservation. And some of them didn't even know about the disease. Most of them didn't know that it was now in the state of Colorado. So that was a huge shock and a pretty powerful moment. This bottom right photo is everyone looking up over this field. There were bats swarming. It was really cool. There were kids there. The kids were going wild, and they really liked it. I got to talk to a bunch of the volunteers about why they were there. I got to show them how to use Survey 123 to upload data about where you've seen bats, and it was great. Here's just some more photos. On the right here, it's when you have trees like this, it kind of creates a flight corridor for bats. So when you're walking through this, there's just bats flying like inches from your face. It's bizarre, but it's really cool to see. This is the echo meter in use. That bat on the right, I don't remember what kind of bat that is, but as you can see, he pointed at a bat. You can actually listen to the sound it's making on the phone, and then it'll show you what species it is. This is a video. It's not, I don't know if the sound's not going to work, but you can see kind of bats flying around just with the contrast of the clouds. I took this video while everyone was gathered over a field watching the bats. In this video, I don't have sound, but Aaron actually says, "This is the most bats I've ever seen on a bat walk," which was a really proud moment for me. I mean, I know I don't control bats coming out, but I was like, I had so much doubt about this location I chose for this bat walk. And then it's the most he or Rocky Mountain Wild's ever seen on a bat walk. So I was super happy about that. All right. So the bat walks are done. What else is there left for me to do? I've kind of piloted this project in a way and pushed it further towards actually getting started. So the next steps after kind of talking to Dawson was to just set up future of Colorado Bat Watch in the best way possible for success. And in my mind, I was thinking not only for Rocky Mountain Wild, but also for any future CLTL student or volunteers. And so I came up with a strategic document that I called Considerations for Next Steps. And it's not super formal. It's a little personal at times, but I did that on purpose because of just personal observations that I had throughout this project. What this document does is it details what I think are important considerations coming from research I did about community science, reading through tons of different journal articles. There's a lot of articles about community science. It's fairly new. It also just comes from personal observations I had throughout my entire project. Some of the resources in here were maps that I made on ArcGIS Pro. These are super simple maps, but it's just to show on the left here, the red dots are where white nose syndrome has actually been detected in Colorado. And then the little hiking guy is where bat walks have actually occurred. The bottom two were previous Rocky Mountain Wild bat walks. And then the northern one is Lions Open Space, the one that I got to plan and facilitate. On the right, these were places that I personally witnessed bats in Larimer County, but not just that, where that would be appropriate, I think would be appropriate for a bat walk. So you have Horsetooth Mountain or Horsetooth Falls Open Space, which I'll get into why I think that's appropriate for a bat walk in a little bit. And then you have Lions Open Space, as well as the Pooter Trail that I detailed earlier. So community science projects have a lot of challenges, and a lot of what I'm saying here comes from this new literature detailing this. I think sometimes people can get really excited about community science projects or citizen science projects and be like, this is so great, we get the public involved, it's going to really make a difference. And now we're kind of seeing some of the issues with it that need to maybe be addressed. And so these were important considerations that I wanted to point out. So one is accessibility. From my research, I found that in the past, not having a resource in citizen science that's accessible, super accessible, can make it difficult to actually attract participants, which in turn can make it an issue with translating the actual monitoring results into resource management outcomes, which is one of the main goals of Colorado Bat Walk. So, I mean, that may mean places like Lions Open Space are a little more appropriate for bat walks or training events because they're more accessible for more people. And I have an anecdote in here because I was discussing a little bit of this with Rocky Mountain Wild, and they told me that some volunteers in the past have been a little more keen on actually doing more difficult tasks rather than it just being completely accessible. And so I think that it's not just making it accessible to everyone, it's making it accessible to what people are looking for in different ways. So, you know, maybe hold a bat walk at Horsetooth Falls for people that want to do that, you know, but also have it in Lions Open Space as well in the future. Just cater to both, so you're expanding your participants. Another one is knowledge and attitude. A lot of research that I went through indicates that like past community science projects with bats have led to increasing knowledge and attitude about bats. What's really surprising is a lot of people are afraid of bats. I feel like people either love bats or they hate them. And so it's interesting to note that you can actually like affect knowledge and attitude about bats with volunteers. A lot of mammal citizen science projects have been shown to actually increase the amount of discussion that volunteers have about conservation of the mammals once they get home and they talk to their friends and families. And so where I think this can be really useful is with white nose syndrome. I mean, you can, when I brought that up at the Bat Walk, it was like powerful. Like people were like, whoa, I didn't know about that. That's here. And I feel like that's something that they're going to talk about now. Or just bringing up even mitigation strategies with that disease as well, and hope that that's shared or that affects their attitude about it. Data quality is a huge one. It's a pretty big issue in citizen science projects. Fortunately, professional scientists aren't always going to look at data produced professional science agencies like that. There are actions that can be taken to mitigate this. Just having like appropriate quality of training, and then retraining as well. Like maybe you know, after a year you retrain someone. You know, it's not just like you do one bat walk and you're good. You want to be transparent about how volunteers are getting their data, their methods to those agencies, so they know what methods you're doing and they can see like, hey, that actually works. Repetition is also really good. So having like hands-on repetition during training. So for example, using the echo, actually allowing volunteers to use the echo meter themselves and do it multiple times, they're more likely to get correct data from it. I do want to say that during my bat walk, not all the participants were interested in monitoring. They were just there just to, they have an intrinsic love for bats and they just wanted to see bats or learn about them. So, you know, a bat walk will have, you know, have training components to it, but a lot of it also caters to just people who want to just see bats, so that it's not just training. Finally, volunteer engagement. This is 100% necessary for community science. You have to understand motivations and values of volunteers in order to keep volunteers coming back, keep them collecting data for you, and also just helping promote and like attract more participants. I mean, if you understand why they want to go on a bat walk, you can promote that or emphasize it. Some really common motivations for community science and other scientists and other projects are social interactions with other people, whether that be the educator that's teaching them about it or just the other participants. Contributions to conservation and science. What I want to say about this is it's important to show the volunteers their importance for doing this, like that their data actually matters, and if data quality is taken care of, it will. And then also just outdoor recreation and discovery, of course. Another personal anecdote related to this, there were, not everyone, but there were a good amount of participants who actually asked me, hey, how does the survey 123 work? How do you upload data about bats? And I was able to show them. I mentioned this before, but a lot of participants just seem to have an intrinsic interest in bats. Not only on my bat walks, but I attended another bat walk just to kind of see how it goes really early on in Wheat Ridge. And people were showing up with bat t-shirts and bat hats with like wings on them and stuff. And they just loved bats and they couldn't stop talking about how they were their favorite animals. So they weren't necessarily into the monitoring aspect of it or the contribution to science. It was more just they wanted to see bats, which was really cool to see. I left the considerations pretty open because I think there's a lot of directions that people can go. And I think that I don't have all the answers or resources to answer what should be done from those considerations, but I do think that they're very important to consider when making future decisions. I also think there's just a lot of uncertainty right now with white nose syndrome now being in the state. Like I said before, that was a huge surprise. And in some ways, I'm at a loss of what to do with that. I do think it should be emphasized, really, just because of me observing people not necessarily knowing about it. And I think that emphasizing it during bat walks, events, promotional material can help discussion about it, can help increase mitigation efforts like cleaning off your gear when you're climbing or whatever. I also think just in the future, it's so important to understand motives and values of volunteers. Like I said before, I would suggest even a survey. I don't know how it necessarily would be done. I wish I could have done that with the volunteers at the time, but I think in the future that should be done because I kind of just made conversation with people like, hey, why are you here? Like, what do you like about bats? Whatever. And I kind of made personal observations, but I think an actual professional survey would be really helpful in like actually understanding for real why people are there. And then I think for bat walks or training sessions, specific guidelines should be created so that any training session is going to be the same with different volunteers, and we can ensure that data quality is set up for success in the future. And then just be transparent about those guidelines with CNHP, CPW, US Forest Service down the line when that data is shared with them. And now we're not close to that yet. That's far down the line, but I think that that needs to be considered and acted on now in order to make sure that that data is actually used. So I just want to reflect really fast on my time in this. This photo is kind of a good photo of my reflection. It was me trying to take a picture of a bat, and that's literally a bat. You can barely see it. And I was just getting so mad. I was like, oh my God, I can't get, because everyone has pictures of what they're doing. And I was like, I'm not going to have any photos of bats. So that's my photo of a bat that I have. That was the best I could get. I want to reflect on core learning objective 2, which is collaborate with diverse stakeholders and individuals. At the beginning of this project, I kind of just thought, oh, this is so easy. This is naturally going to happen. I'm going to be working with people from the public, an NGO. I'll be talking to Larimer County. It's just going to happen naturally. And what I didn't realize is that when you have community science, there's this web between all these different stakeholders and individuals that needs to be intact in a certain way for it to really work. And I touched on that before. So for example, data quality ensures that that connection between volunteers and agency like CPW is intact, as well as understanding motives and values of volunteers. I didn't get that at first. And when I started doing research and I started reflecting on my observations, I realized this is what I'm missing. This is how you actually correctly show core learning objective 2. And I think that in the future, when you have those considerations in mind, this can really be successfully done. And it's not just Colorado Bat Watch. I think it's the same for any community science project. I want to talk about core learning objective 7, demonstrating leadership skills to work effectively in group environments. I came into this project not having really any hands-on experience with conservation before. I've been a barista, that was the most recent thing I had done. And it was a little daunting thinking I'm going to be speaking to all these people about this conservation issue, this species, this program. I'm responsible for going out and finding a location for a bat walk. I wasn't on my own because I had so much support from Rocky Mountain Wild, but physically I'm on my own in Larimer County. I'm the ambassador here, figuring all of this out. And that was really daunting at first. And then I kind of just realized not only how fun it is to go out and trudge around in wilderness and look for bats, but also just how much I appreciate education and interacting with tons of people from the public. I thought back on my time with community science when I was younger, just doing some eBird stuff. And I remembered how much I appreciated it. And I was like, I can turn that into an educational moment for people. And so I really ended up getting more and more confident with myself, as well as the freedom that I had with the choices, because I was working for an NGO, which has a lot more freedom than, let's say, a state agency. So as time went on, I got more and more confident with my choices. I would present what I thought was the best action to Rocky Mountain Wild every week. And I would say, I think we should do a bat walk here. This is not a good location. I'm going to talk about this during the bat walk. And they were completely supportive of it. So I think this was a huge confidence booster in being a leader for the future. Finally, I just want to say thank you to Rocky Mountain Wild, especially Dawson and Brett, as well as everyone in CLTL who sent me either places where they found bats or just funny videos of bats that they found. And I also want to thank Evan, Logan, and Matt for letting me sleep on their couch while I had to do the bat walks. And also Evan for driving the echo meters to me because I had forgot them right before the bat walk was about to start. Thank you, guys.